Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to actually get to some coding. Like I talked about in the last video, we're going to make something that's basically a clone of the Forest app. The key feature of the Forest app is that it keeps you off of other applications on your phone. This app is for people who get easily distracted from social media, email, stuff like that. So it's for them to set a time frame in which they don't want to use any other app on their phone, and it rewards you with a 2D or 3D asset. And in our case, it's going to be a 3D asset. Okay, so let's start coding. We're going to create a new project. It's going to be an app, and I'm going to call this guy Focus Buddy. And make sure that you don't use the same organization identifier as I do. You're going to get some kind of warning or error or whatever. All right, so I'm going to click Next. You're going to store it somewhere on your desktop or wherever you store your Xcode projects. And you're going to see something like this when you start. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And what you should see when you first start your new project is image and a text that says hello. And then what I have here on the left is a screen grab from the Forest app. And we're going to use this as a template for our UI. And if we take a look, what you can't see here that I kind of snipped off a little bit is the coins on the top right-hand corner up here. These are coins that the user is going to get if they complete or partially complete their focus task. For example, if they set that they want to focus for 10 minutes, instead of getting like 10 coins or whatever, they might just get like a portion of that. If they were only able to focus for 5 seconds, maybe they get 5 coins, something like that. So, and then the coins in the Forest app allows you to purchase other assets that you can grow. In our case, we're going to use those coins to buy different eggs that hatch into different characters. Let's go ahead and start out with this like header view. In the Forest app, it looks like they have an H stack with a hamburger menu, some kind of like social buttons here that we're going to ignore, and the coins. We're just going to have the coins, but we'll still use an H stack to align it properly to the right-hand side of the app. I'm going to click in here and I'm going to do Control-N to create a new SwiftUI file. And I'll call this header view. And then inside this header view is going to be an H stack. I'm actually not going to use the preview because I know it's not going to align properly in the vertical space. I'm going to use a spacer to push my coin view to the right-hand side, and this is going to be the coin view. And then for our coin view, that's going to be an image of some coin, and then it's going to have text that has the number of coins that the user has. For now, let's just put in 999, and we'll pull this from some model later on. And then you might want to add some styling, at least make this a little bit bigger, like a title. And that should be good for now, but we don't have an image called coin, right? So we have to add it. The way that you add images is in the asset catalog. I'm going to click this plus icon on the bottom and add an image set. And this is where you're going to grab the asset that you have. I look for free assets on Google. Google has tools that you can use where you can search for images based on its license. For example, Creative Commons license. This is just for learning purposes. I'm not intending to distribute this app. So at least for now, I'm good with just taking a random asset from Google search and just using that. But you want to be more careful for sure if you're going to distribute the app. Okay, let me pull in that asset that I have. And then you want to open up this right-hand panel if it's not open already. And I don't have individual scales, I just have one scale, so that's why I'm changing it to single scale. And then we want to rename this to coin, and that way that matches what I have here. Okay, now I have this header view. Let's go back to our content view. And instead of this being in the VStack, the first thing in the VStack is going to be that header view. And I made a few errors here while I was quickly coding. The coin view itself is also going to be in an HStack, obviously. You can't return multiple views. Okay, so we have an HStack. Inside the HStack, we have the image and the text. The HStack is in another HStack. pushed to the right-hand side. Now if we go back to content view, let's take a look. Perfect. All right, we want to push the header view up to the top. And so we're going to add the spacer underneath. And that should push it up. The next thing we want to add is this label here. That'll be pretty easy. We can just stick in a text and it says you have focus for 11 minutes today. And this is going to be a dynamic number. For now, I'm going to pull it from some property in content view, but later it'll come from a model. But this will be time focused for day. And we'll put this up here. All right, and we want to push this also to the top, so we'll add another spacer underneath that. And we can style this text a little bit later. The next thing we're going to want is that this progress view and the underlying SceneKit view that's eventually going to be there. I'm going to put in a to-do to put in that progress. So we're going to add the circular progress bar. We're going to add the 3D scene on top of that circular progress bar. And then underneath, it looks like there's a tagging system. So the user can say, hey, I'm using this time to focus on studying or focus on work or focus on a hobby project or whatever. I think it's overkill for this MVP that we're making. Maybe at the end we'll circle back, but I like to make MVPs as simple as possible. As much as I can strip out while still getting a pretty decent app, I'm going to do. I don't think tags are essential to what this app is supposed to do, so I'm going to drop it for now at least. The next thing is going to be that timer. The timer in the Forest app, I think that you set it by using this, what I'm calling a progress bar. I think that this little dot here, if you move it, you're actually changing the time in which you want to focus. I don't like that behavior for a user. I think that's more intuitive if that were the progress, like counting down the amount of time that you have left until it reaches 0. That's the way that I'm going to code it. That makes it so we have to solve the issue of how are they going to set their time. They can tap the text field and edit the time directly. We can do that. But I don't think that that's super intuitive. They might eventually tap the number and figure it out, but I also want to add a stepper. I want to add some kind of like stepper UI so that a user can very obviously see how they're supposed to change the time there, but also include the ability for them to tap the text field and edit the time directly. That's what we're going to do anyway. This is going to be another separate SwiftUI view that we're going to make. So this is another to-do to make the timer. And then underneath, we're going to have this button that says start, plant, focus, whatever. And then, so we're going to have this button. And the button probably makes sense to be grouped in with the timer. But you could do it either way. You can have the button here or inside of the timer, but let's just go ahead and add the button here. We're going to have some kind of action and a label. So the action is going to be start focusing, and then the label is going to say something like, yeah, focus. And then we can style this next. All right, so I added some styling to this button. All right, so the next thing that I want to add is a very common extension on color to be able to instantialize color with hex values, either an integer or a string. And I'm going to do that by tapping into one of these, Command N, and adding a new Swift file. And I'm going to call this color plus ext for extension. And in here is where I'm going to start creating that extension. You can probably find this online somewhere and just paste it. It's a really, really common thing. Even Code Completion wants to do it for you. So I have one that I like to use, so I'm going to just paste it in. I wanted to mention that if you didn't want to use the color extension, you can also add color sets this way, and you can have your own color palette just defined in assets instead of using the color extension. And back to our content view. I'm going to pull up my color palette. I honestly found this on Pinterest or something like that. I just searched for color palettes. You can also use this popular website called colors.co, and it has trending palettes, and it's really easy to copy hex values directly from here. But anywhere that you find a color palette, even if it's through Google, you can do that too. Yeah, just find something that you like, and then you can start using it in the app. This is the color palette that I liked. And if you open it up with preview, you can copy anything that's in an image, which makes it helpful to be able to copy these hex values. I liked the blue for a background color, so I don't want the focus button to be exactly this shade of blue. Maybe we can darken it up a little bit. That's what I want to do anyway. But while I have this blue here, let me go ahead and make the background color blue. And that's going to be color, and we're going to use hex. Add that string that we copied. Cool. And then you can use other tools to darken this color. You can get some luck by looking at some kind of shade generator. I'm using this guy here. I just put in the hex, and then I can grab one of these darker colors for the button. If I put it side by side, I think this is the color we're using. So if we go just a couple shades darker, we should be good. And now if I go back to here and put in the hex, it should work. I might go a little bit darker actually. Yeah, that works for me for now at least. Now that we have our button set up, let me take a step back and start creating the timer. I'm going to create a new file again. I'm going to make it a SwiftUI view, and this is going to be timer. I think timer is a reserved keyword. Let me just say custom timer. Be safe. Let's go ahead and create the UI first, and then we're gonna hook it up and make the logic work. Like I said, I want the timer to have these stepper buttons. The stepper that comes with Swift makes it so that I can't separate the plus and the minus. They have to be bundled together side by side. And I want it so that there's a button before and after the countdown. I'll show you what I mean. I want to start with an H stack, and then I want some kind of button, and I want a text field because, like I said, I want the user to be able to edit it. And then I want some other kind of button. And of course, this isn't going to compile. It's just to show you what I'm thinking. All right. And then the button, I wanted to have the system image for like the plus. And I've talked about this in other videos, but there's this SF Symbols app on the Mac, and you can look up different icons that are available to you. We can use the plus, or we can use the plus with the circle. I like the plus with the circle a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. You can copy the name. And that's what I'm going to use to create my button image. And it has a system name, and that's going to be what we just copied. That's really small. One way you can quickly make it bigger is using large title. And the action for this button is going to be to increase the time value, which we have yet to make. And then we're going to create the text field, but let's just copy what we have so far for the plus and make the minus. And you can check what the minus looks like. I think it's the same. I think it's minus circle, but let's check. Yep, minus circle. Again, copy name and paste it here. And I can delete this button, and this is going to be decrease time value. And let's now make the text field. I'm going to uncomment this. And the first parameter in a text field is going to be the placeholder. So I'll say time. And then the next parameter is going to be a binding to what's stored in the text field. We have to create that. I'm going to call it time remaining. I'm going to make it at state. And we're going to make that 60. Time remaining right now has to be a string because the text field takes a binding to a string, but we're going to figure this out a little bit later. We can either have a computed var or some other property that can tell us what the int value is of that. But let's first connect this guy up. Remaining. And you can already see the 60 there. We're just going to put in some styling now. All right, I just made it larger. I added the keyboard type as number pad, and the reason why I did that is because this has to be a number. I know it takes in a string, but we want to force it on the user side to be a number. They can probably still copy and paste a string, but you know, I'm not going to think about every single edge case for this MVP, but it's something you can think about if you're thinking about making this an app to be distributed. But yeah, for now, just doing number pad is fine with me. There is this modifier to make it centered, and then I just added a little shadow to make it look a little bit better. Okay, so now we have a way to play with this number here. I think I can put in 10 here, and it looks right, but it's not acting correctly, right? Let's start hooking in some things to actually be able to adjust the time value with these buttons. All right, so I was just thinking about how I'm going to be able to use this time remaining when I want to increase or decrease its numbers. I think it's going to be pretty cumbersome working with the string. So I'm going to make another state variable that's just going to contain the integer value of time remaining. This does have a downside of now we have to keep these two things updated and in sync with one another. But it does have the advantage of not having to do conversions everywhere where I want to use time remaining as an integer. So I'm going to make another state private var for time remaining value. And that's going to be 60 at first. And then the other thing I want to do is add a did set. And the did set is going to keep time remaining updated. So when we update time remaining value, it's going to update the time remaining string. And so time remaining is going to be time remaining value. I would also like to add a did set here to keep them both in sync, but the problem is that they will keep calling each other infinitely and it'll make an infinite loop. So I just have to pick one. And now I know that when I update time remaining, I also need to update time remaining value. But that should be fine because I only use time remaining here in the text field. So when I do change time remaining, then I want to update this time remaining value. And that's the only place I have to keep track of it. And there is this new on change where it returns two properties. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that. All right. And so when we change time remaining, we ignore the old value, but use the new value to set the time remaining value. This is the string, and this is putting that string into this int and just keeping them updated, but only when the value is positive and we can actually convert it. That should do it. And let's actually increase and decrease now. So time remaining value is going to be increased by 1. And to decrease, there we go. Let's go ahead and run this and see if we have any problems. I'm going to increase this. I'm going to decrease, and I'm going to change it here. Good. All right, it's looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and take this custom timer and bring it back to our content view. And we probably want to change the tint, right? So this is using that system blue, and we probably want to add a little bit more styling, maybe some padding around these guys. I'm gonna add some padding to the whole button. I just want it on the horizontal edges. Looks good. And then we'll do the same for the timer. Looks better. And let's change the tint. And that's going to be this color. I want it darker. That looks better to me. And maybe we want to add some bottom padding too. So we're going to add padding, and that's going to be bottom. And let's make that 40. It's looking like what I want it to look like. I can still change these here. Good. All right. So we have our UI looking pretty good. The last thing I want to do is add this circular progress bar. We're definitely not going to add the 3D scene today, but we can at least add the circular progress bar. I'm going to click in here and Command N to open up a new file, new SwiftUI view, and this is going to be custom circular progress bar. And let's go ahead and add it. So we're going to start out with a C stack. Gonna have a couple of circles. They're gonna have stroke. I like to make this a little bit bigger. Start out there. We're gonna add a frame. And now that I'm thinking about adding a frame, I think I'm gonna add a geometry reader so that I can make this the width of the circle be a percentage of the screen width. So let me go ahead and take a step back and put this inside of a geometry reader. And then we can make the frame a percentage of the geometry's width. The stroke has to go before the frame, of course. All right, so now that I've done that, I can see that the circle is off to the left. One quick way to center this is to put the C stack into an H stack and just center its content in the middle. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I can add spacers to center it. Great. Another thing I know is going to happen is when I start to trim the progress view or the progress bar, that it's going to start out on the right hand side here. And I want to rotate it so it actually starts negative 90 degrees from up here. So I'm going to add a rotation effect. And the angle is going to be negative 90. And then at some point, we're going to have a trim that looks at the actual progress. But for now, I'm just going to stick in 0.5 just to visualize something. And then the color, we don't want it to be gray, right? We want it to be a color from our color palette. So I'm going to bring up that color palette to look at what I want to choose. I think tangerine looks really good on top of this pool color. So that's what I'm going to choose. Instead of color.gray, we're going to do color hex and then put in the string. Looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to take this custom circular progress bar, go back to our content view, and I'm just going to add this down here. We can see there's a little bit of overlap. We can fix that by adding some padding. And then this text now shot up quite a bit. I'm going to add some padding instead of using spacers. So I'm going to get rid of all these spacers now. And instead I'm going to add padding. So we have the header view. That's going to take some bottom padding. And then around this guy, we're going to add some padding. And then the bottom looks okay for now. Let's make this March title. And then I want it to be centered, so multi-line center. I don't know if I'm loving how the black font color is looking on top of the pool, but let's just quickly see if it looks better in white. Maybe with a shadow. I think it looks a little bit better. I'm going to also add the white to that 60 as well. So that's in custom timer, and that's going to be here, foreground style dot white, and add a shadow to that too. If you don't like any of the If you don't like the style choices that I'm making, feel free to change them. Should be easy enough to change colors and change whether or not a shadow is there. Great. I think we've done enough for this episode. I hope you learned something today, and I will see you next time.